Hello, I'm Brent Hyde, and welcome back to Brent Hyde Outdoors. In the previous episode, I had explained that I'd teamed up with Doug Thornton and Mondo Gonzalez, and we had met out in Nashville, Tennessee. Refer back to that video. I'll leave a link in the description below if you haven't seen that already. But I explained in there that we formed a team and we are doing some archaeological surveys in Arkansas and in other states. But this second episode is going to be about Arkansas. It'll be the exploring into Arkansas episode 2, and it's going to take us to some mound locations, one in Van Buren County and a couple places in Jackson County, Arkansas. We're going to interview a man in Jackson County that's going to explain to us about an experience he had as a child, and we're going to see some of his artifact collection, and we're going to visit some mounds near his home location. Also some mounds on a farm that I grew up on as a child. So stay with us, but first of all, I want to point out a mound in Van Buren County. I want to point out a place that's well known, show you a picture of it 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, before it was uncovered, and then show you a present day picture of it. And then I want to ask you a question about something that's here in Arkansas. Okay, so you saw the 1900 picture of what we now know as Teotihuacan, and then you saw the 2020 picture that shows what Teotihuacan looks like today. So, what is this picture? If the 1900 picture looked like a dirt hill and this looks like a dirt hill, then what if we uncovered this? What would it be? Okay, so that was an Ozark mountain site that we visited. Now we're going to take you over to the flatlands and farming country over in the Delta in Jackson County. I'm going to start out by showing you some drone footage to give you an overview of the area, and then show you a little bit about what we do when we're on site. And we'll let Doug and Mondo tell you a little bit about some of the tests that we do with soil testing and with our tri-field meter. What you doing, Mondo?
Well, I'm looking at the soil content to see the consistency of it. You know, see if it changes, 6 inches, 12 inches down.
Right.
Since we are on top of the mountain, I want to kind of just see what I think would be the consistency of the soil, especially being so close to the water. I was looking also just for anything that might pop up that hasn't been farmed.
Yeah.
And any rocks or anything.
I was impressed.
You see, it's just super consistent, nice soil.
All right, Mondo, give us a report.
Probably about 2 feet down on this bad boy, and looks very consistently uniform, which would be, I think, would be appropriate for a mound in this area.
So you think this material was all brought here in place?
And I mean, usually on a burial mound, depending on how far you go down, but you're gonna have at least in some of the other mounds that we looked at, you're gonna have different layers, very specifically buried.
Yeah.
You wouldn't find it to be generally uniform in a burial mound, because again, they're covering up a burial that's underneath, versus if this is something where they were living, they were doing it to, you know, have to live here.
Right.
They wouldn't need to go try to find all the different, you know, charcoal or ash or sandy loam or just certain topsoils. But so that's why I was like, I want to get down a couple feet and see. I mean, it's not the only indicator, but it would be an indicator that this would be a lived on mound versus a burial, or, you know, this could be ceremonial.
Right.
Anyways, interesting stuff. I was hoping to see if I would pop up anything.
Yeah.
Being that far deep.
I wonder if somehow or another this is astronomical in nature. Like, could these features emulate something in the sky?
Yeah. The hard part, you know what we'll probably need to do is, if we're gonna walk all three of them, would be to go get a GPS there and then to put it on there, because like as you mentioned, from the satellite, there's not enough relief to see it. But if we measured it, then we could see the outline to see whether it was similar to like the Giza Plateau.
Stand on top and pull the Latin long.
Yeah, and we can also get elevation. Do you have I've got an app that'll give us elevation.
Yeah.
We can get down in the valley and do some elevation, then go on top and see how tall we are.
I can look that up.
I got a question for you. How was all these mounds formed? This is flat ground. Hard work.
By hand, yeah. Yeah, watch out. That's what tells you, again, what's their purpose.
But now I can show you some mounds that are, all the ground around them are gumbo. And that mound would be pure sand.
Yep. That's what
I know that somebody brought that ground in there.
Okay, and what did you read, 1.7 over there?
Yeah, so this would be a heavy dense metal. So if we pick up something that's
What
heavy
did that
dense
register?
metal like this, it only hit 1.8, so it's an anomaly, but not enough for me to care about.
Yeah. The Native Americans could have utilized something that was already here.
Well, and that's the reason why we have the tri-field meter, is, you know, just to verify if there's anything that is anomalous, it's going to pick up some sort of a magnetic field, especially if it's heavy metal. Like you said, if it could be a plow, old chain laying around, tri-field meter should pick up on residuals of it. But as you know, Mondo's sitting here and he's doing this pilot hole, if nothing's coming out of that.
Yeah, nothing's coming out. Nothing. I didn't get a rock, or I was looking. And it's really easy digging. It's nice.
Yeah, no clay.
Yeah.
Which that's an interesting thing, is there's no clay.
But from what
But
I
just
know,
north of
the
here,
ground
there's a
where
lot
the
of clay.
Indians lived around here, it is all sand.
It's all sand, yeah.
It's a swamp area, and I believe the material to build this could have come from there. But we'd need to know what kind of material's over there. But between here and there, I believe the soil is different. Like, see the flat land over here where the deer ran?
Yep.
Okay, I believe that's different material than this right here.
Gosh, this would be, you know, hey, we're gonna just dig a couple holes, take pictures, we'll cover them back up. I don't know why anybody would care, honestly. Yeah.
And then on the other side of that tree line is an old oxbow, which tells you that the main creek channel has probably changed over the years, and that oxbow is left there to identify where the old creek channel used to be.
I would want to see, based off of Google Maps, once we find all these different mounds and we connect them together, for one thing, if they line up with constellations, that'll be interesting.
We actually just did that, Mondo and I, when we were on the first hill, or the second hill maybe, the first hill. he pulled out his star map, and he said this lines up with Orion. It would, the way it rises and everything. So we did that while you were down there.
Of course it does. So then the other thing is, let's pull it up on Google Maps, go to that 30,000 foot view, and draw an azimuth north, south, east, and west, and see if these lines will line up with other mounds. If they line up with other mounds and then it keeps going, I wonder what type of a pattern that would make. Because let's say if the people were migratory, are these mounds part of a migratory path that continuously point in a direction? You know, it's just pieces of a puzzle that we're trying to put together.
In different periods, there were people that were migratory for the purpose of following game.
Right.
And then other periods when they got to where they're planting more crops and they're gathering and they're eating out of the creeks fish and what have you, they were more stationary. But you got to remember that the Trail of Tears thing happened and pushed several different tribes across this ground over time.
That's right. So are they migratory paths because of hunting and gathering? Are they migratory paths because they're following seasons? Are they migratory paths potentially because they were being pushed by federal troops at that point in time? I don't know. I'm using a trifold meter, not for ghost and supernatural crap, but just to see if there was any type of ancient technology that was used pre the First Nations people. If it's a large source of mass, then the trifold meter should be able to pick up on it. And these mounds are of a high elevation as you stand upon them. If you look across the area, everything is flat. Now, this is a delta land, so it's all flat. And then you just randomly, in the middle of nowhere, you have mounds that line up to the Orion constellation. I don't believe in coincidences. That's what I say. You guys have found buku amount of that, and like you said, whenever it rains or if they disc up the field, there's artifacts all over. But that's and just what I'm looking at, I expect to find that, right? But if I find a brass staff here, or if I find a brass broadhead or a warhead of a spear, now there's an anomaly. Where did this come from? Because if you go into the whole ancient aliens documentation and all these people, they'll say at one point in time there was an ancient race and they had bronze and they had steel and they had iron. Well, if this is an area that co-located a campsite of those people, then we should find something on that. But that's never been found here. It may not have ever been found here just because it hasn't been found. So,
or it hasn't been looked for.
Or it hasn't been looked for. So there are certain instruments, you know, if I had a metal detector, I would like to do some different searching techniques and grid certain areas off around the mounds and search. But, you know, we don't have that time or the instruments on us, so, you know, we're doing what we can with what we got. But we're out here looking.
Yep.
So.
So we're on the banks of Village Creek, which has been known to locals here in Jackson County for a long time for a place that holds a lot of artifacts. So there was Native Americans that lived here. Anyway, we come down here because of a story that we've heard about Mitchell Fisher, who we will interview, that when he was a boy, him and his brothers and some friends found a 7-foot skeleton on a fence row that's back up way a little bit.
All right, so we're in Jackson County, Arkansas. That's the northeast side. We're near Village Creek. And we have a gentleman here with us who's going to share us a story of something that happened in his childhood that involves finding a 7-foot skeleton. This is Mitchell. Mitchell, what is your story with this?
Well, when I was about 8, 9 years old, this fence row right here, just a little further up than what we can see, there was a 7-foot skeleton that was dug up. And it had a hole right here in the top of its head. Now, I don't know if that was from a bullet hole or if it was from a probe. But what happened to the skeleton, I don't know if it's even still there or not.
So who was with you?
Marlon.
Your brother?
Marlon. Everybody was on that. Gone. They're all dead.
Was there any abnormalities about the skeleton besides obviously the hole in the middle of the skull?
That I don't No.
What
So,
led to the
I was just
discovery of it?
I really don't know.
Okay.
It was already dug up when I seen it.
Okay.
Who dug it up?
My brother and 3 of his friends.
How deep was it?
Ooh, about 3 foot
3 foot?
under the ground.
Okay. Did it have any strange markings around the ground? Anything like a headstone, a burial stone, or a place we're saying this was a site for burial?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Within this area, has there been an excavation done that found any remains of Native Americans?
Not in this area.
Not in this area. Did you ever find any artifacts, projectiles, pottery?
Oh, yes.
What kind?
Arrowheads.
Arrowheads.
Several of them.
What kind of arrowheads?
Now,
Size?
There's been Daltons found here, several Daltons. Just bird points, beads, marbles.
Jewelry?
We call beads jewelry.
Okay. All right.
I mean, there's been some 5 or 6 inch arrowheads come out of this field right here.
That's pretty significant size, obviously.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So within this area, about how far back from this fence line would you say that body was found?
It was found right on this fence line.
Along this fence line?
Yes.
How old do you think that fence line is?
Ooh, probably back from Depression.
Depression time?
Yep.
Okay. So as we're here, we're going to be excavating this area. We're going to be doing some probing cuts into the ground. We're going to see if there's any similarities with the ground that we're here right now compared to the other mound areas that we're at. All right, so the base reading on the standard for the magnetic field that the tri-field meter is reading for this EMF is 0.2. It may hit 0.5, but in that field, over 20 different times, I hit an EMF reading or a milligauss reading of above 1 point to 2.6 and 2.7, which means something is emitting a magnetic field in the middle of a field where guys have been disking and planting. That's an anomaly. That's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting a baseline reading on the outside of the field on the edge of the forest nearest to the river, or excuse me, to the creek, to see if we get any of the similar type of readings. I got no cell phone on me, so I'm sanitized. Nothing's giving off any EMF reading. So on the standard and then the weighted, it's just barely picking up anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it could be going off because I'm holding it. Once again, unlike a lot of the ghost shows, if you shake this, you'll generate different points. Put it on the ground, should have a basic reading of almost nothing, but 0.1. 0.1 was the base reading on the road right there before we walk into the field. So I have to ask the question, what made it hit a 2.7 milligauss? And the EPA says that between 0.5 and 2.5 is the recommended amount of milligauss that should be acceptable to be in within your home. You start getting above that, you need to get out of that area.
So when it jumped to 2.7 out there, did it maintain that, or was it just a spike?
It would spike, and then I would stop and measure, and it would go from 0.9 to 1.7 and down, and 1.9. So it's a fluctuation of numbers, and that's odd. Out in the middle of the field, there's a circular pattern where there's no vegetation. Looks like maybe deer bed down there, but there's no growth of new vegetation, and it doesn't have over coverage from triple canopy like this in the forest. It has the maximum amount of sun exposure, so there should be new growth of some sort of vegetation, and there wasn't any new growth either. So
But sparse vegetation is typical of compacted sand areas where mounds were. It's common to find the vegetation don't grow very well at the peak or the top of the mound.
And the last thing that I found that was interesting, and I only had one spike on it, so it could be an anomaly, but it's just something to write down. is in the middle of the field, in the middle of that circle, there's no vegetation. I read 1 volt. So that's why we're out here getting eat up by ticks and mosquitoes, just trying to figure out what possibly could be within these burial mounds.
So initially, Mitch got us permission to get on this property. He knew the property owner. And after our initial survey, we decided that we may want to come back at a later date and do some more detailed study. And so we've had a discussion with the property owner again, and he has granted us permission to use ground penetrating radar and or excavate if need be. So we may come back at a later date and do some of that. So afterward, Mitch invited us back to his house to look at his artifact collection. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you now.
What'd you say this was? This
I have no idea.
It almost looks like a top, like, you know,
but
like almost
that
like
come out of a field.
Did it really?
When I was there, What do you think that bone that up?
Well, this is like an ancient pick for the teeth.
I called it a needle.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, if it had a, it's interesting. If it had like a hole here, you would think that would be a great
needle.
Yeah.
Unless they wrap the twine around
it. Which it looks, that's a good, because of the angle on there, it would be perfect to do that.
Just tie a little bow knot.
Yep. For the weaving that they would do.
That was kind of like your Calf Creek right there.
Yeah, it's got some, let me see that.
That field where you found your redhead at, that one right there come off the field down at the bottom of it. I mean, just about every piece I got, I can tell you where they come from.
Yeah, that's the way I am. I remember finding them and remember where I was standing when I found them.
Yep.
Let's see. So here's the one we found.
Yep.
And just comparison. Where was this pink one found?
This is just some of the stuff I have.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean,
I didn't know you had that.
Grinding stone?
Yeah. No, it's I don't know what you call it.
It's a groove tomahawk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
It's a head knocker.
you feel that.
That's like a war club.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what you'd do with this?
You'd hit somebody in the head with it.
Yeah, you'd split a branch, it goes around it, and you tie the top. War club.
That's why it's grooved.
Hey, they're all back there.
You find pieces like this in museums,
Exactly.
and you don't ever get to touch them.
Yep.
You don't get to
Well,
see
touch
them.
it, man. Touch
I know you don't get to hear the backstory.
Hey, that's what I hate.
This is huge. I mean,
This
this is
belongs
museum.
to my wife.
Okay.
Actually, it was brought to my house, and my father-in-law said I wanted to stay in your house, so wherever me and her go, that's where it goes.
Yep.
But something like this, people need to see it.
Oh, they do. That's tremendous.
But
It's so smooth.
Yeah.
It's not a rough texture.
just like that little pot that comes from Missouri, it's the same way.
yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that, I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, in
I mean,
ancient times
that's
they boil water.
almost like
No, it was in a field. I mean, there was an old tree. It stood there for a long time.
Yeah.
They found
So we sat there for quite a while telling stories and looking at artifacts and telling stories about how we found this and that. Then it was time to head back to our base camp. So we headed back to our base camp, and on the drive home, we planned our outing for the next day. And I'll share that next day with you in the next episode. So until next time, be safe and God bless from Brown Hide Outdoors.